What is up, Ewa crew? Today we are exploring 3 cold case crimes that miraculously got solved years after detectives had accepted dead ends. Number 3. The disappearance of Ashley Freeman and Loria Bible. 18 years to solve. On December 30th of 1999, Ashley Freeman and Loria Bible shockingly vanished from the scene of a double murder and arson in Craig County, Oklahoma. The 2 girls had been best friends for years, and Ashley had turned 16 the day before their disappearance. To help her friends celebrate, Loria had asked her father's permission to spend the night at Ashley's family's mobile home. Loria promised her father she would be home by noon the next day, but this promise would unknowingly be the last ever exchange between the father and daughter. When firefighters first arrived on scene around 5:30 a.m. on the morning of December 30th, Ashley's home was engulfed in flames. Ashley's parents, Karen and Danny Freeman, were found dead inside the scorched house with fatal wounds to the back of the head. The 2 girls were nowhere to be found. The hunt for Ashley and Loria kicked into overdrive as detectives tirelessly searched a nearby lake, mine shaft, and a water-filled quarry. Investigators followed multiple promising leads, including a confession to the crime by 2 convicted killers, Tommy Sells and Jeremy Jones. The 2 men later recanted their confession and claimed they had been lying for the thrill of it. Years pressed on, and the mysterious disappearance of the young girls continued to bewilder authorities and the Craig County community. Were the girls still being held captive somewhere nearby in the community? Loria Bible's family refused to take down their Christmas tree after she went missing, holding on to hope that one day she would return home and undecorate with the family. However, 7 years after her disappearance in 2006, the Christmas tree fell apart. Fast forward to 2017. Newly released court documents uncovered a threesome of criminals that appeared to have been well known in the law enforcement community. Warren Phil Welch, David Pennington, and Ronnie Busick were notoriously unhinged substance cookers, users, and violent criminals in December of 1999. Prosecutors had supposedly alleged, but were unable to prove, that Welch, Pennington, and Busick had been at the Freeman trailer to settle a substance deal on the night of the girls' disappearance. Witnesses had confessed to police that after murdering the couple in the mobile home, the 3 suspects had kidnapped Ashley and Loria. An ex-girlfriend of Welch informed police that when she had lived with Welch in the months after the murders, she had discovered a leather briefcase filled with graphic Polaroids of what she was sure had been Ashley and Loria. She recognized the girls from the reward poster, but had been too afraid to come forward at the time of the discovery. Phil Welch had threatened her to keep quiet about the photos, warning that if she told anyone, she would end up in the pit, just like those 2 girls. What finally brought this 18-year case to a close was an anonymously dropped box of documents to Craig County sheriffs. The box pointed investigators to a new witness and former case detective, Tom Pryor. Although Tom Pryor no longer had the files from the case on hand, he had kept an insurance card that had been found on the site the day after the Freemans were brutally murdered. The insurance card miraculously belonged to a woman that had lived with Welch at the time of the murders, and was proof enough to officially place him at the scene of the crime. Both Welch and Pennington died before the discovery of this incriminating information, but 66-year-old Ronnie Busick was arrested and charged with 4 counts of murder in April of 2018. The bodies of Ashley Freeman and Loria Bible have still never been recovered. Number 2. The murder of Jane Doe. 20 years to solve.
On July 21st, 1999, the body of a young woman was discovered in a cornfield in Racine County, Wisconsin. Her injuries were brutal, and her right arm was unnaturally bent behind her. Investigators were unable to identify her body and began calling her Jane Doe. They had so little evidence to go off of that the victim's denim jacket was the closest thing they had to any leads. No shoes had been discovered at the scene of the crime, so it was possible that the victim had been killed elsewhere and dumped in the cornfield. Unfortunately, the night before her discovery had been a torrential downpour, which kept police from collecting crucial DNA evidence. The body was autopsied, and it was determined that the victim could have been anywhere from 18 to 30 years old and possibly had mental disabilities. The investigation proceeded, but authorities still could not identify the victim. The young woman was laid to rest with more than 50 people in attendance at her funeral, and her gravestone continued to read, "Daughter, Jane Doe," for nearly 20 years after her brutal murder. Then, in November of 2019, a concerned citizen reported a conversation she had with an intoxicated acquaintance. This conversation turned police onto Linda LaRoche, a Florida woman who worked at a medical center at the time of Jane Doe's death. She had been drunkenly boasting about a young woman she had murdered back when she lived in Illinois. This led investigators to question LaRoche's children. They admitted that their mother had taken in a young transient around 1994 and coerced her into providing daycare and housekeeping services in exchange for a bed. Finally, investigators believed that they had a name for their Jane Doe. Peggy Lynn Johnson was a 23-year-old with cognitive disabilities and no immediate family. Johnson was treated very poorly while she was staying with LaRoche. Following her arrest and interrogation, Linda LaRoche's former husband said that the last time he saw Peggy Johnson, she was lying lifeless on the ground of their home. LaRoche claimed that Johnson had suffered an overdose and that she had taken her away from the home so her family would not be involved. However, she later stated that she left Johnson with a known grandmother and that she was alive and well the last time she saw her. But when Peggy Johnson's grandmother claimed she had never seen or met LaRoche before, her story changed yet again. She admitted to driving Peggy to Wisconsin, but claimed that she had dropped her alive and unharmed on the side of the road before driving off. Linda LaRoche was taken into custody for the murder of Peggy Johnson, whose identity was confirmed through familial DNA testing. Soon after, arrangements were made for Johnson to be laid to rest with a proper gravestone alongside her mother.
Before we get to number 1, let's do a subscribe challenge. In 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hit that subscribe button and give us a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video. Now on to number 1, the Golden State Killer. 45 years to solve.
Beginning around 1974, the notorious Golden State Killer, also known as the original Night Stalker, tormented communities from Sacramento to Orange County, California for more than a decade.
Hello? Hello?
Breaking into homes and eventually escalating to murder, the Golden State Killer is believed to be responsible for at least 13 murders and over 100 burglaries in California. Operating under a blanket of night, the perpetrator would break into homes while women and couples were asleep. Finding his way to their bedroom, he would then wake his victims and blind them with a flashlight to the face.
Police Department, Sheriff speaking. You're never gonna catch me, you dumb f***. I'm gonna fucking deny it. Be careful.
After tying up a couple, he would often place objects such as plates onto the back of the husband and threaten that if he heard an object move, fall, or break, he would start killing at a moment's notice. In the midst of these endless attacks, Sacramento County held community meetings in order to calm the fears of the general public and answer questions. One of the original detectives of the case, Carol Daly, claimed that a man took a stand at one of these meetings to criticize both police and the men who allow their wives to fall victim without fighting back. Not long after, someone broke into the man's home and assaulted his wife. This led investigators to believe that the Golden State Killer had been in attendance at the community meeting. Eventually, in the early 80s, one man fought back against the attacker and forced him to flee the property. The attacker's next crimes soon turned murderous as he moved from Northern California to Southern California and decided he could no longer afford to leave witnesses. Investigators had yet to arrest a single suspect tied to the murders, but were diligently collecting a breadcrumb of DNA evidence along the way. They clung to the hope of stopping the serial murderer before more victims suffered his abuse. In May of 1986, it had been 4 years, 9 months, and 8 days since the last known murder. Janelle Cruz, an 18-year-old cashier at Bullwinkle's Pizza, would soon become the youngest known victim of the Golden State Killer. On the evening of May 4th, 1986, Janelle was visiting with a male coworker inside her home in Irvine. Janelle and her friend thought they heard strange noises coming from outside her home near her garage. When they went to investigate, they found nothing. At approximately 10:45 p.m., Janelle's friend left her home. The next day at around 5 p.m., a real estate agent discovered Janelle's body. It was suspected that she was killed with a pipe wrench missing from the backyard. Perhaps the noises Janelle and her friend heard was the killer maniacally choosing the pipe wrench. Janelle was not only the youngest victim of the Golden State Killer, but she was also the last known death at the hands of such a notorious man. Years passed and the assault slowed to a stop. Many assumed that the killer had moved states or had passed away, and the nation feared they may never have answers as to who haunted California by moonlight for more than a decade. However, longtime investigator Paul Holes uncovered a breakthrough in January of 2018. Using the site GED Match, Holes uploaded the DNA profile of the Golden State Killer and miraculously found distantly related family that eventually led to one suspect. Joseph James D'Angelo was a former police officer who was fired from the force in 1979, 3 years after the Golden State attacks began. Once Holes and his team narrowed in on D'Angelo, they collected a DNA sample from a discarded tissue that happened to perfectly match their mystery attacker. 72-year-old Joseph D'Angelo was finally arrested in April of 2018, 45 years after his first known crime. As of March 4th, 2020, D'Angelo offered to plead guilty in exchange for a life sentence to avoid the death penalty.
If you enjoyed this video, a playlist is going to pop up right now. Click on one of these videos and go watch. See you guys next time.